My biological parents gave me up for adoption, and I didn't have much to eat while growing up, but now they've contacted me and told me that I have a brother. So, before talking about the dilemma, let me tell you my story. I'm 24 years old, and I grew up in group homes. If you don't know what a group home is, it's basically a smaller orphanage. Living in a group home was difficult. We didn't always have guaranteed meals, and we literally shared everything. So, if we got new clothes, we had 10 other kids fighting over them. If we had pizza, there were 10 kids fighting over it. When I was 11, I became friends with a boy at school. He invited me to his house to spend a couple of nights, and his parents noticed how much I was eating. I ate uncontrollably, despite being relatively thin. There were a few other things they noticed about my behavior that were very strange. They realized I probably wasn't being fed enough and decided to take action. Eventually, they fostered me, and I never looked back. So today, I'm 24 years old, and I have a good office job. I'm generally happy, and I'm still close to my adoptive parents. My biological parents contacted me 2 weeks ago, and they were relieved when I responded. We ended up arranging a meeting yesterday. I was already pretty undecided about meeting them, but I only did it because my mom and dad said it might be worth it. So we sat down and talked during lunch. They told me they gave me up for adoption because they didn't want to be parents. They were in their mid-20s and married. The only reason they gave me up was because they weren't ready to be parents. After that, I pretty much stopped being civil and started making sarcastic comments like, "Oh, so I was ready for the group homes?" I was being pretty rude, and my mom was fighting back tears. After they told me I had a brother, I said, "Oh, okay, so you were ready to be a parent, but you weren't ready to take care of your child." I'd had enough, paid the bill, and left. I was very angry and told my adoptive mom what had happened. She said I should be more understanding with them since it probably took a lot for them to contact me and apologize. She kept going on about how she would support me no matter what, but she thinks I'm being a bit harsh. My parents called and asked if we could meet again and talk more. My mom thinks it might be beneficial now that my initial emotions have passed. If I think I was acting like a fool, and my mom thinks so too, then I probably was. I will meet with them again this Friday. This time, my mom will come with me. I've made them listen to my perspective, and now I'll do my best to listen to them and understand them. I think having my mom there will make it much easier. She's a calming presence, and I would hate for her to see me lose my temper. Also, a couple of people have suggested I develop a relationship with my half-brother. I'm strongly against that for a few personal reasons. Relevant comments. 1. Who are they to give me another chance? I don't need them. They originally gave me up for adoption. I was adopted under supervision or no one wanted me, and I ended up in a group home. I simply wasn't wanted at that time. 2. Why should I be grateful to them? That I was starving in group homes and mentally affected for a long time, instead of being raised by two people with college educations and jobs. 3. Yes, without a doubt, my life would have been much better if I hadn't had to deal with years of struggling for food and the trauma that came with it. I still believe 100% that the least they could have done was provide me with a stable home, at least in terms of food and shelter. 4. My mom is the kindest, most loving woman in the world. So, I don't think she has negative intentions in suggesting I meet them again. 5. My younger brother is 7 years younger. That doesn't hurt any less. 6. There are comments where I mention abortion and why it should be legal. I agree and disagree. I agree with the sentiment that it should be allowed if people choose to do so. But I certainly don't like it when people say my life is an example of why it should be legal. That is extremely dismissive and rude. Several people have mentioned in this thread that my parents should have aborted me, and that's repulsive. Yes, I had a difficult upbringing, but for people to say I should have been aborted doesn't help. It literally makes me feel like absolute garbage. 7. Another commenter brings up the topic of abortion. Sure, that's valid, and I agree. And as I said, if you want to choose an abortion, it's your choice, and it should be your choice. However, saying I should have been aborted is extremely rude and dismissive. Put yourself in my shoes and imagine hearing that. I don't think we're in great disagreement here. 8. You're absolutely right. That's how I approached it in the first meeting, and honestly, it was hard not to interrupt. I felt insulted by the way they were explaining things to me. I tried, and eventually, I had enough of being reasonable and civil. 9. Unofficial explanation here. 1. I was adopted by someone. 2. That adoption didn't work out, and I entered the foster care system when I was a young child. Between steps 2 and 3, that's where things get confusing. Here's the thing, they placed me with a family, but I wasn't adopted. I don't remember much of that time, and honestly, the documentation doesn't explain what happened there. 3. I moved between 5 to 6 group homes between ages 4 and 11. 4. I was adopted at age 11. 5. They found me through social media and LinkedIn. 10. My problems didn't magically stop when I was adopted. Before anyone says I should have sought help, I did, and therapy doesn't magically solve your problems. Sure, my life turned out pretty well, but what if it hadn't? Would I still have to accept them into my life anyway? Well, I received a lot of love for my last post, and they did too, and I'd feel like it was completely justified. Update 2. Well, I received a lot of love for my last post, along with some criticism. Overall, I've learned a lot from it, and I'm working on becoming a better person. So, as per my update, I met with them again, this time with my adoptive mom. This meeting was very different. This time, they wanted to hear about my experiences in the group homes. I talked about it, and I got a little emotional. It was one of the few times in my life that I shared what happened, and it was hard. So I told my stories, and my biological mom got emotional again. Then, they told me that they never intended for me to end up in that situation when they adopted me. They explained more about my adoption process, and I understood their reasons better. My biological parents deeply apologized and told me they didn't know my life had taken that turn. Things started to lighten up, and I began sharing more about my current life. I talked to them about my college years and some of my accomplishments. My mom and I told a few funny stories about me, and it was nice. I had a good time. I think having an intermediary, my mom, was helpful. Now, about the part that many people were wondering about. Many people wondered why they reached out now, and we discussed it. There are 2 reasons. They want my name included in my grandfather's will. I was his first grandchild out of 6, so they wanted to leave something meaningful. I'm not sure how I feel about it, especially since I don't know them at all. Money is money, but it feels strange accepting it from them. It also feels strange that everyone else in their family knows I exist, but never reached out. The other reason is that they told my brother about me. He has been pushing to get in touch with me and meet me. I told them that I'm still not sure about meeting him, but it's definitely a possibility. Here's another interesting outcome. I discovered that I'm mostly Greek and I have a lot of relatives in Greece. My parents offered to organize a trip to Greece to explore and meet the family. I'll probably decline. My adoptive parents are Italian, so it's cool to know where I really come from. Overall, allowing them to speak and really explain themselves helped things. I think they had good intentions in reaching out, and I'm not sure if I want to have a relationship with them, but I'm at peace with everything. Many people suggested therapy, and I'll be starting therapy in 2 weeks. I think I've tried for too long to handle everything on my own, and I hope to change some things about myself. So, yes, things have changed, and I appreciate the advice. Comment where I talk more about my adoption. I was adopted by an outside family, and that failed after my parents terminated their parental rights. That's when I entered the group homes. They gave me up for adoption so the rest of their family wouldn't find out. Also, they were in their 20s while the rest of the family was in their teens or even younger, so it would have been hard for anyone to take care of me. Eventually, they told everyone, and yes, that's it. I'm making this update to share a bit of my life. Many people have privately written to me wanting to know more about me and my biological parents. They officially offered to pay for a trip with them to Greece to meet my relatives, but I turned it down, as I mentioned in my previous post. It felt a little strange, like it was a way to compensate me for what had happened, so I kindly said no. As for the inheritance, I also said no. I have no intention of meeting the rest of my biological family, at least not for now, and it would feel weird to do it just for the money. I'm not like that. I met my brother, and it was awkward, but I think I'll keep seeing him because I don't think he's at fault, and after all, I don't feel so bad about him. I have my adoptive brother, my friend who took me into his home, but with him, it's different. My husband knows a girl who sends him messages that are too graphic for my taste. Well, I'll start by saying that I'm generally a pretty confident person, and I've never felt that I had issues with it until I read a message sent to my husband yesterday, and I'm a bit shaken up. Sorry, this might be long. To give a bit of context, my husband practices mountain biking. He's been doing it since he was very young, he knows what he's doing, and he's out there every day. He usually rides with the same group of guys, but mainly on weekends. My husband goes out every day of the week. Fortunately, his job allows it. When he's out, if it's just during the weekdays and the dogs are free, he takes them with him. They love it. So, about 6 months ago, he was out in the morning with the dogs and ended up coming home earlier than usual. While he was out, he found this girl who had fallen and injured her arm or wrist pretty badly. As you can imagine, he's been through this many times before and knows exactly what to do and where to go for quicker medical attention. He took her to the parking lot, stored the bikes and dogs, and drove her to the doctor, who referred her to the hospital. And then he came back home. All good. About a week later, one of the guys he rides with sent him a screenshot of a post in a Facebook group specifically for people who build and maintain bike trails. It said something like, "I'm looking for someone named Husband's Name who helped me last week when I fell and took me to the hospital." He was driving a truck type and had 3 dogs and then listed our dogs' names. She had posted in some groups before being linked to the trail building group that my husband rides with. My husband isn't on social media, so he said he could send her his number. She texted him to verify if she had the right person. He said yes, that he was glad she was feeling better and happy to help. She offered to pay him or take him to lunch, which he declined, and simply said again that he was happy to help. They exchanged texts now and then, with her starting the conversation, and they were mostly like, "Hi, how are you? Hope you're doing well," etc. Until she started feeling better and was able to ride again. That's when the messages turned into, "Hi, we should go to the trails sometime." Now, without bragging about him, he's really good. He used to race when he was younger, just like many of the guys he rides with. Most people in the park know who they are, and generally, if they hear them coming, they'll just move aside and watch them pass. He tries to reject her offer in a way. Eventually, that happens, and he gives her some advice, which then turns into her texting him more often about cycling, asking him to instruct her and general things. This continues over the next few months. It seems like they're starting a friendship. I never had any concerns about it and was pretty happy for him to continue, and so they did. Then yesterday, Monday, he went out with the dogs and ran into her. He said they talked for a while and then took a lap with the dogs to relax before heading back home. She started texting him when he got home, and I could see these messages coming through on the iPad while I was using it. To be clear, he's not hiding the messages. He leaves his phone openly, with no passcode, lets our daughter play with it, and is happy for me to use it. He's never acted strange about it at all. He knows that the iPad and laptop are linked to his phone, and that anyone who uses them can see everything. He's never given me any reason to worry. It's the intentions I'm not too sure about at the moment. Anyway, we have 3 hunting dogs that are regularly used in the fields, and although they might seem to be running wild on these trails, they are extremely well trained and in tune with what my husband is doing, which becomes more evident when he's not on the trails and they follow him, watching every one of his movements. These messages started talking a little about the dogs when she sent a text that ended like this, like a slave seeking to please his master, plus some weird emojis. I admit, I don't like emojis or the language people use nowadays. Frankly, I don't even know what that little face means, but something about it made me feel uncomfortable, and I sense there's some subtext here. He responded, but seemed to ignore that last comment. However, this made me think and review their communication, and I feel like I've noticed some red flags. 1, she always initiates. 2, if she doesn't get a response, she seems to keep texting until he replies. 3, not once has she mentioned or acknowledged the fact that he's married or has a family, even when he mentions being absent for my birthday or going to our daughter's dance show. She changes the subject as if pretending we don't exist or shutting down any mention of us. 4, she often finds excuses for them to meet alone. I'm sure there's more, but I don't want to scrutinize every message and feed this more than I already have in case it's nothing. Am I crazy for thinking there could be something between them? I don't want to mention it in case it's nothing, and I come across as paranoid. I just don't feel good about it. Also, I'm pregnant and the hormones are messing with me. Should I say something, or let it go and monitor this more closely for a while? Or is this the effect of a 30-something pregnant mom whose husband seems to be aging like fine wine, and any woman he knows is just doing what she loves and staying in shape because of her hobby? Some relevant comments. Women, I think you've handled this with grace, but I think it's totally reasonable to have a conversation with your husband and simply tell him, "Sweetheart, she's being pretty persistent and you're not doing anything wrong, but I'd appreciate it if you'd stop her and just tell her you're not in a position to be her trainer and your time is focused on other things, so you can't help her." She seems a bit dazzled and needy for attention, but he's not doing anything wrong here, so I wouldn't make too big a deal out of it. Thank you. She's doing the same kind of annoying approach that men do, pushing the limit, but never openly crossing it, so that if he confronts her, she can turn it into flirting when it wasn't. That's much easier to address directly if you already know that others see exactly what you see, and your partner is on the same page as you in terms of how you plan to deal with it. So there's no chance of it backfiring. From what you've shared, she sounds like a strange person, but he sounds like a happily married man who isn't interested in what she's doing and really wants her to leave him alone or behave normally. I don't think you have anything to worry about, but that doesn't mean you won't feel better hearing it from him. The situation escalated quickly. My last post got way more responses than I thought. I wasn't going to do an update, but I feel like I owe it to everyone who told me to trust my instincts. For those asking why my husband hasn't been more blunt with her, in short, he always tries to keep the peace. I underestimated how well known he is in our town. He comes from a well-known family in our area. He was a downhill cyclist in college, and he appears in several YouTube channels. People come here specifically for the bike trails, and generally, wherever he goes, there are a few people who recognize him and want to greet him. It's not a big town, so everyone knows each other to some extent. And like anyone, he never wants people to leave any interaction with him feeling bitter or upset. After our daughter went to bed, I talked to my husband. I shared my thoughts with him, and he agreed that she was being inappropriate and that he had never said or done anything that indicated he was okay with it. He had hoped that by ignoring it, she would get the hint and leave him alone. He didn't want things to get awkward or embarrass anyone, and he admitted that he probably should have said something. So, after reading all the comments, there were a ton of amazing ways people suggested he could have stopped her, which in hindsight would have been an incredible way to shut it down. However, he didn't want to cause a scene, so we went with the idea that we're starting to prepare for the baby, we have a lot to do, and simply don't have time or energy to spend on bikes or meetings, and he won't be available to her in the foreseeable future. He wrote it, gave it to me for approval, and I hit send. Minutes later, his phone rang. I was in the kitchen, and he was in the living room. I saw him raise his eyebrows and just look at me. I walked over, and he simply handed me the phone. The audacity of this girl stunned me. She replied, "Okay, do you think we could meet quickly tomorrow?"